Evening, everybody. My name is Olivia Rushholm. I am the Assistant Director of Sixth Form in charge of the pastoral side, and I'm going to be talking to you about well-being in the sixth form today. Next slide, please, John. So to start off with, in the sixth form for forms, we don't have any more than 15, and it's typically about 10 per form, which means that tutors can get to know the students really, really well. The other thing is that we split up the forms from the Year 11 forms and do them by subject, which means that they can work together on presentations, but they also get to know people really well who are in the classes with them. So it breaks up any sense of cliqueiness that forms down the school, and people do absolutely tend to love it. And on the last day, when they dress up as something beginning with S, they tend to do so in their forms, and they really do love the new form groups. Next slide, please, John. So in terms of registration and form time, they have one lesson of tutor time in year 12, which is sort of a private study, but they tend to do group work again within the subjects that they focus on. It can also be for PSHE, or it can just be a time for fun and relaxation. So you can see here we do things like colouring. We have loads of board games in the sixth form, and we do team building games such as building constructions out of spaghetti, which you can see them having a great time with there. Next, please, John. We've also got a great team in the sixth form and beyond. So if you look at the bottom, we've got Mr. Sanders, who's our leadership coach. And that means he works with people on things like self-esteem, self-belief, communication. He's also the a teacher of law, so he works with law students when it comes to UCAS. Next to him is Mrs. Rosser, who's one of our academic mentors, and next to her is Mr. White, who's another academic mentor. What they do is they are based in the study area upstairs, and when students have study periods, they see them to make sure that they are on track with their studies. They help with organisation, they help with academic issues, but also with some pastoral issues. They're particularly good at revision and organisation. And Mr. White has a background in business and IT, and Mrs. Rosser has a background in geography. So they are also subject specialists. Above them, we have our welfare centre team. So Mrs. Holiday, of course, is the school nurse, but next to her we have Faz and Dimple, who are our counsellors. Now, students in the sixth form can self-refer for counselling, or they can come and see us and we can refer them. And it's very much destigmatised to go to counselling in the sixth form. It can be a time where there is kind of high pressure, and talking that through is something we do encourage in the sixth form. Next slide, please, John. Another thing is, this is something quite close to my heart, yoga, meditation, Pilates. So I'm a trained yoga and Pilates teacher, and we have another trained yoga teacher who comes in on Wednesday afternoons and teaches yoga to the sixth formers. We also do, during exam time, we do meditation, and we have had an exam room when exams were on that students could come to. It was a quiet room with nice music and nice smells, and just a chance to relax away from the stresses and strains of exams. Next slide, please, John. So I know we've spoken about leadership opportunities already, but I really think that leadership is a good way towards well-being. Those who are in the leadership teams, in the student leadership team, in the house teams, really find it very gratifying. And actually, a lot of the time, we find that when students have something to really focus on like this, it's great for their sense of self, their sense of development. And we have some really amazing students who come out of leadership opportunities. Next slide, please, John. More leadership opportunities. This is two of our current deputy head girls who do some outreach with Mr. Bird. So they go to charities to deliver goods. They go to old people's homes. They work with the prep and external preps, and they find that is really good for their well-being, helping in the wider community and getting a sense of the world. Next slide, please, John. Speaking of that, we have the head girl team, or the student leadership team in the sixth form, is built from factions. And one of the factions is the pastoral team. Now, the pastoral team is in charge of making sure that there is communication between the sixth form team and the students about whether people need a bit of TLC, whether they need something for PSHE, if they're having a particularly difficult time. Often we provide free Ralphs, which is our local cafe, But we also spend a lot of time listening to them and just checking with them that everybody's happy, if there are any issues that need dealing with. And they're fantastic student ambassadors led by Alyssa on the left. And they're also all interested in areas like Jade at the top is interested in diversity. We've got interest in mental health, interest in different cultures, and they're all in charge of making sure all of those issues are addressed and telling us if they think they need to be addressed in more detail. Next slide, please, John. For new students, we have a buddy system. So this is Emily, she's in charge of the buddy system. So new students are given a buddy in year 12 who looks after them. So nobody is left ashore. Thank you. Next, please, John. We have a lot of clubs and societies, which includes Equality Society that I'll talk about later, such as debating, book club. If you believe the bottom right-hand side is book club, that was when we went to see The Great Gatsby after reading it, and things like NUN. And again, having that sense of purpose, finding something you love outside of the curriculum is, I believe, really fantastic for the students' whole self and general well-being. Next slide, please, John. We have Activities Week coming up, and these are some pictures of things that we've done before in Activities Week. On the bottom left, we have the people from the Forgiveness Project who came in and talked about their experiences of being in difficulty and how they managed that, and we did some activities around well-being within difficult situations. You can see on the bottom right, we did Pilates with everybody. In the middle, Mrs. Glover did an exercise class, which went down very well and was very popular. And then top left, you can see a sort of arts and crafts. So within Activities Week and the Week of Fun, which is after exams, we try to do as much for students' well-being as possible and as much that is fun and is going to bring them back to a sense of self after exams as we can possibly have. Next slide, please, John. We also regularly send out a well-being survey. We do get a temperature check from students, and they do have the propensity to come in quite a lot and sit on the sofa and say, I need help, I need to talk about something. And we very much try to maintain an ethos of come and talk about things before it gets too much. And students do that. And My Sofa is a place where people come in, cry, get things sorted, and then go off happier, I hope. But we also make sure that those people who aren't maybe confident enough to come and sit on the sofa and say I need help are checked up on as well. And so every half term I send out a well-being survey where students can say how much, for example, energy they have, how much motivation they have, whether they are feeling positive about life, whether they're feeling positive about sociability, and if there are any red flags that come up from that, we do make sure either tutors or one of the sixth form team sees that student and checks in on them and make sure that any support is in place that needs to be put in place. Next slide, please, John. We also really care about diversity in the whole school, and in the sixth form we do a lot with it. Our pastoral faction of the student leadership team is partly in charge of that, but we also have a Equality Society, which is for any sorts of equality, and that is linked with the Female Lead Society. We celebrate International Women's Day, we celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month, and we also celebrate Black History Month. So we really try to make sure diversity is really embraced throughout the sixth form. Next slide, please, John. We also have PSHE and Scope Days, and these are some of the sorts of things that we do on PSHE and Scope Days. So we've had Gemma Oaten in from STEED, the Eating Disorders charity. We've had people in from People Change Minds, which is an LGBT charity. We do a lot on health and relationships, so we take it a step further and talk about the sorts of things that, for example, fertility, that students may not normally be taught in schools, but we feel that if they are taught it in the sixth form, then it's useful for the rest of their lives. We also do a lot of PSHE on pre-university. So, for example, cooking, finance, student loans, things that are going to be useful for them to them after they've left the sixth form. Next slide, please, John. Okay, that's me done with the majority of the well-being. If anybody has any questions, please let me know and I will endeavour to answer them.
Hi, sorry, apologies there. Yes, good evening. Just a couple of questions in terms of what learning enrichment support we offer to our sixth formers as a continuation from the senior school.
Thank you, yeah. So on the first couple of days of year 12, we have an induction day and then form times. At that point, they're given an ALICE test and also a dyslexia screening, and they're asked to fill in a survey about whether they would like learning support, even if that dyslexia screening doesn't bring anything up, whether they'd like more support from the learning enrichment department. Miss Davis, who is in charge of learning enrichment in the sixth form, will then see those students weekly or once, depending on what they want and what she feels they need, and they will work together on their needs. Also, if anybody is struggling kind of academically but doesn't want learning support, they can have support from the academic mentors, Mrs. Rosser and Mr. White.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned Model United Nations very briefly earlier on. Could you just explain a little bit about what that is to parents who aren't sure?
So Model United Nations is a scheme internationally where students are given a country. Normally in schools, they're given a couple of countries per team. They have to research that country and research the politics around that country. And then they go to normally Halesbury in March, I think it is, and they have to become ambassadors for that country. And having been there, it's incredibly impressive to see what they can achieve. And again, it gives them that sense of purpose. It gives them that sense of achievement, which I think really, really develops their well-being.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions for now.
Fab. Well, thank you so much for coming, everybody, and do email us or get in touch if you have any questions.